Hi, class, and welcome back to our lesson on sound. In our first lecture, we looked at some of the history of sound in the movies. In part two, we talked about elements of sound, specifically the three major elements of dialogue, sound effects, and music. And here in part three, we're going to look at something of the relationship between sound and image. And by now, you should have watched at least one, and preferably both, of the films for the lesson. The Hurt Locker, directed by Catherine Bigelow, 2008, and Booksmart, Olivia Wilde's 2019 film. They're both very different films. One's a war film, one's a teen comedy, but they're both very sophisticated in their use of sound, and they're both very instructive for our purposes in their use of sound. So as we discussed, early sound was not very sophisticated. The first few decades of sound in movies, sound was not even recorded. It wasn't even married to the visual track, right? And then once sound did come along as part of the visual track, it tended to be somewhat restricted, right? Mono tracks, you didn't have the sort of richness of sound, nor did you have the ability to create so many different kinds of sounds as we do today. And the complexity of this, the complexity of modern film sound, and its increasing artistic importance in the overall design of the film has required a new creative member of the production team, the sound designer. Sound designers create a total sound environment for the film's images out of all of the elements that we discussed previously. Dialogue, which might include voiceover, all of the different kinds of sound effects, some of which are invented, and music, which can be diegetic and non-diegetic. It can be orchestral score or pop music. And all of that is used to create an environment that not only supports the film's visuals, but also extends their meaning. Film is considered a visual medium, and film purists will tell you to look at silent film as the epitome of film as art. But the reality is, I don't think that we could watch films today without sound. Sound lends so much to the overall experience. Because sound can actively shape how we perceive and interpret the images. And it directs our attention quite specifically within the image. Sound cues can anticipate images such as footsteps or a creaking door. Think how important that is to a horror film, for example, or the faraway howl of a wolf. And sound gives value to silence. A quiet passage can create almost unbearable tension. Think about how effective A Quiet Place was, right? Very little spoken dialogue, because the characters in that world cannot speak or the alien monsters would come and find them. So sound still tells the story, but it's done so in a very creative way and through a lot of use of silence. And sound bristles with as many creative possibilities as editing. Through editing, one may join shots together of any two spaces to create a meaningful relation, and similar to that, the filmmaker can mix any sonic phenomena into a whole. It's really quite amazing how much can be done. Playing with volume, playing with levels, bringing this sound up and bringing this sound down, mixing sounds together to create sounds we've never heard before, right? So with the introduction of sound cinema, over time, the infinity of visual possibilities was joined by the infinity of acoustic events. So go ahead and watch just this brief clip of The Hurt Locker. It's about 1 minute 30 seconds near the beginning. And just pay attention to the way that sound is used. The movie won Academy Awards for sound editing and sound mixing. The way that sounds were created for the film and the way that sounds were mixed together to create the overall sonic environment. And it's very sophisticated. So listen for the sound effects, listen for how silence is used, and how the silence helps create the suspense ahead of the explosion. And for contrast, watch this scene from near the end of the movie when Jeremy Renner's character goes home and tries to go grocery shopping with his wife. And the environment is so foreign to him now, right? His world is back in the war. Like the idea that he could live in a place where there's endless rows and brands of boxes of cereal. Nothing makes sense to him anymore. So listen to how the sounds in this scene, the very, very subtle sounds of the muzak and the cart squeaking, kind of underscore the foreignness of this environment to him. So as they construct the soundtrack, the filmmakers and the sound designer must consider what audiences will hear at any given time and which sounds will get the most emphasis. So it's not just putting all these different sounds in the soundtrack, all of the different dialogue and the music and the sound effects. It's figuring out how to mix them. So some stand out while others are more in the background. Because dialogue conveys so much information, right? We need to be able to hear the dialogue so we know what's going on most of the time. Speech gets the most emphasis, and rarely do sound effects or music overwhelm dialogue, unless it has a specific narrative purpose. But sometimes music will drown out dialogue, sound effects will drown out dialogue, and the visuals and the sounds alone will tell the story. And a really good example is in Booksmart, in the party scene, when the two best friends have that sort of throwdown argument when they really just get in each other's face and say a lot of nasty things. After a minute or so of listening to all those hurtful things, Olivia Wilde and her sound designer drowned the sound out and just let music play. And it's almost more effective because we see the hurt on their faces and we don't need to hear more of those hurtful things. We get the idea already, right? So the music adds another emotional element without distracting from the story. And Olivia Wilde is really good at this in this film, which is why I chose it. Another great example from Booksmart is the pool scene, when our hero jumps in the pool at the party. She goes underwater and she starts swimming towards the object of desire. She's filled with hope and a sense of promise. And the music and the sound effects really tell the story of her emotional journey. So go ahead and go back to the course site and watch this video in which the director, Olivia Wilde, talks about how she chose the music for the scene and how she used it. Sound is also a powerful tool for helping filmmakers create the illusion that the world of the story extends beyond the boundaries of the frame. Right? Sound helps create that three-dimensional world so that we believe that there's things happening even when we can't see them. Details that are unseen, but which are important factors shaping the storyline. An example might be a gunshot that's heard off screen, right? So the characters that hear it recognize that something happened in the next room. Combining sound and image can produce jolting emotional contrast as well. While typically the soundtrack corresponds to the action, accentuates the mood evoked by the visual details, sometimes filmmakers will pair an image with a sound that seems wildly inappropriate, producing a tension between the aural and the visual info. And an example might be a child speaking with the voice of a demon. Or you might see something in a comedy where the sounds don't match up to the image. Certainly you see this all over social media, especially TikTok, Snapchat, and Reels, where people are filming all of these short vids and mouthing dialogue from somewhere else, right, that's not their own. So it's pretty commonly used in visual media. And then finally, combining sound and image allows filmmakers to present two different points in time simultaneously, as when a voiceover narration describes past events. So we'll just finish up with this analysis of sound design from Spielberg's Munich, just to give you another really good example of how sound design is used to tell a story. Spielberg's a master at it. So go back to the course site, the Less Than 7 module, and watch this and all the other corresponding sound videos